Imagine a man standing in the blood-red glow of a Maryland dawn, whip in hand, his soul fracturing like cracked earth under a merciless sun. Not a monster, but a slave forced to become the devil's right hand, lashing his brothers to save his own kin. What divine curse twists a heart so? Josiah Henson's secret shame, the betrayal that birthed Uncle Tom, yet damned him eternally. Dare you uncover the truth? The mist clung to the tobacco fields like a shroud, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, as if the land itself mourned the souls bound to it. In the dim light of pre-dawn, shadows danced across the wooden slave quarters, where the air hummed with the quiet rustle of bodies stirring from fitful sleep. This was Charles County, Maryland, in the year 1789, a place where the American dream was forged on the backs of the enslaved, and freedom was a whisper carried away on the wind. Here, amid the sprawling acres of Francis Newman's plantation, a child entered the world not with cries of joy, but into a silence broken only by the distant call of a mourning dove. That child was Josiah Henson, born into chains that would bind not just his body, but his very spirit, weaving a tapestry of moral agony that history has tried to sanitize. From his earliest breaths, Josiah's world was painted in hues of brutality and loss. The plantation sprawled like a living beast, its fields stretching endlessly under a sky that seemed perpetually bruised with storm clouds. Tobacco plants rose in regimented rows, their broad leaves whispering secrets as the wind passed through, but those secrets were of sweat and suffering. The overseers patrolled on horseback, their silhouettes stark against the horizon, whips coiled at their sides like serpents ready to strike. Josiah's father, a towering figure with muscles honed from years of unrelenting labor, was the first to teach him the cost of defiance. He wasn't just a laborer, he was a man of quiet fire, his dark skin etched with scars from lashes long healed, his eyes holding a spark that spoke of ancestral kings reduced to chattel. It happened on a sweltering afternoon, the kind where the heat pressed down like an invisible hand, making every breath a labor. Josiah, barely toddling on unsteady legs, clung to his mother's skirts as she worked the fields. Her name was Millie, a woman whose beauty had been worn away by hardship, her once vibrant features now shadowed by perpetual vigilance. She bent low, her hands calloused and bleeding from pulling weeds, when the overseer, a wiry man with a face twisted by cruelty, approached. His eyes lingered too long, his intentions clear in the leer that split his lips. When he laid hands on her, groping with entitlement born of unchecked power, Josiah's father exploded from the shadows like a force of nature. Fists flew, words unspoken but understood in the primal language of rage and protection. The punishment was swift, a spectacle designed to instill terror. The overseer, bloodied but unbowed, called for the master. Francis Newman, a portly man with a powdered wig that spoke of outdated grandeur, decreed the sentence. Josiah watched, wide-eyed and frozen, as his father was dragged to the whipping post, a weathered oak stump in the center of the yard, stained dark from years of blood. The air filled with the metallic tang of fear, sweat mingling with the earthy smell of turned soil. The whip cracked like thunder, each lash tearing flesh, but it wasn't enough. In a fit of sadistic rage, the overseer drew a knife, its blade glinting in the sun, and severed his father's ear with a single, brutal slice. Blood poured like a river, soaking the ground, and Josiah's father let out a roar that echoed across the fields, a sound not of pain, but of shattered dignity, a cry that seemed to call out to God himself for justice. That image burned into Josiah's young soul like a brand, his father, kneeling in the dirt, one hand clutching the ragged stump where his ear had been, his face a mask of agony and unyielding pride. The plantation fell silent, even the birds ceasing their song, as if the world held its breath in horror. Soon after, his father was sold south, vanishing into the maw of the cotton plantations, where men were worked to death under the blistering sun. Millie never spoke of it directly, but her eyes' deep pools of sorrow told the tale. She would hum old spirituals under her breath, songs of Exodus and promised lands, her voice a fragile thread in the night. "The Lord sees all, child," she'd whisper to Josiah as they huddled in their cramped cabin, the walls thin as paper, leaking cold drafts that carried the moans of the weary. "But sometimes, he tests us with fire to forge our faith." As Josiah grew, the plantation revealed its full, insidious nature. It was a realm governed by the rhythms of oppression, dawn bells summoning the enslaved to the fields, where the sun beat down like divine wrath, scorching skin and spirits alike. The crack of whips punctuated the day, a soundtrack as familiar as the buzz of insects. Corn and tobacco demanded endless toil, planting, weeding, harvesting, hands blistered, backs bent, dreams deferred. Human lives were tallied like livestock, auctions loomed like specters, families ripped apart on the block with the cold efficiency of commerce. Josiah learned early the art of invisibility, keeping his head down, his thoughts hidden, but his body grew strong, his frame filling out with the promise of power. Tall and broad-shouldered, with skin the color of rich earth and eyes that burned with intelligence, he stood out even among the resilient. When Francis Newman's son-in-law, Isaac Riley, inherited a slice of the estate, Josiah was transferred like property, a mere line in a ledger. Riley was a man of contradictions, handsome in a rugged way, with sharp features and a mop of unruly hair, but his soul was as volatile as a summer storm. Prosperity came and went like tides, debts piled up, fueling his temper. The Riley plantation mirrored its master, unpredictable, fertile yet fraught. Fields of golden corn swayed under azure skies, barns groaned with curing tobacco, but beneath it all lurked the ever-present threat of violence. Riley's house loomed on a hill. Whitewashed and grand, its windows like watchful eyes overlooking the quarters below. Josiah's ascent began subtly. A neighboring white boy, defying the codes of the time, taught him letters in secret sessions by the creek, where water babbled over stones like forbidden knowledge. Words became Josiah's hidden weapon, unlocking ledgers and plans. Riley noticed the way Josiah organized harvests with efficiency, his keen eye for crop rotation, his ability to quell disputes among the workers without overt force. "You're no ordinary N***********, Henson," Riley once slurred after a night of whiskey, his breath reeking of spirits. It was praise laced with poison, for soon Riley, drowning in debts and disinterest, elevated Josiah to overseer, or superintendent, as he euphemistically called it. This role was a serpent's gift, coiled and venomous. Privileges trickled in, a modest cabin with a thatched roof that didn't leak as badly, scraps of better cloth for Charlotte, his wife, a woman of quiet grace with warm brown eyes and a smile that could pierce the gloom, and their children, whose laughter was a rare balm. No more endless days in the fields, knees grinding into dirt, sun-searing flesh. Instead, Josiah managed, assigning tasks, overseeing quotas, mediating between the master's whims and the workers' endurance. But the price? He became the enforcer, the buffer, the betrayer in their eyes. The moral quagmire swallowed him whole. Each morning, as fog lifted from the Potomac River nearby, Josiah donned a mask, stern, authoritative, his voice booming commands that echoed across the fields. Yet inside, his heart twisted like roots in rocky soil. He wielded the whip not as a sadist, but as a surgeon, calculating each strike to appease Riley without maiming. "Better my hand than his," he'd rationalize in the dead of night, staring at the cabin's rafters, Charlotte's steady breathing beside him, a reminder of what was at stake. The enslaved whispered, some called him protector, slipping him pleas for lighter loads, others spat Uncle Tom behind his back, a term not yet infamous but laden with resentment. Josiah navigated this like a sailor in treacherous waters, anticipating Riley's rages, fueled by bad harvests or empty pockets, and softening blows where he could. The air on the plantation carried layers of scent, the sweet, pungent cure of tobacco in the drying sheds, where leaves hung like ghosts, the sharp tang of manure fertilizing the earth, the subtle, acrid undercurrent of sweat and fear that permeated everything. Sounds formed a relentless orchestra, the clang of tools in the smithy, where chains were forged, the low murmur of prayers in hidden gatherings, the occasional wail of a child separated from kin. Sunsets painted the sky in fiery oranges, but they brought no peace, only the dread of tomorrow. Josiah's cabin, though privileged, felt like a gilded cage. Walls of rough-hewn logs, a dirt floor scattered with straw, a single window admitting slivers of moonlight. Here, with Charlotte's head on his chest, he confessed fragments of his torment. "Am I damned, love? For playing the master's game?" She'd trace his scars, whispering of biblical trials, Job's endurance, Moses' burdens, infusing spiritual solace into their shared darkness. Yet the divine undertones haunted him. Was this God's test? A path to redemption through suffering, or a slide into sin? Josiah pondered scriptures he'd memorized in secret, verses of justice and mercy clashing with the reality of bondage. Guilt gnawed like a hidden rot, eroding his resolve. He dreamed of flight, of leading his people across rivers like the Jordan, but fear of patrols with snarling dogs, of recapture and worse anchored him. Survival became a prayer, each day a bargain with fate. The summer of 1818 arrived like a biblical plague, humidity thick as judgment, storms brewing on the horizon.
Tobacco yields faltered under relentless rain, leaves wilting, quotas unmet.
Riley's debt swelled, his moods darkening like gathering clouds. The enslaved moved with heightened wariness, eyes darting, whispers urgent in the shadows of cabins.
Sales loomed, families auctioned off to settle accounts, children torn from mothers' arms in scenes of biblical lamentation.
Tension crackled like dry lightning, igniting small acts of resistance, tools lost, work slowed, eyes meeting in silent conspiracy. Then came Daniel, a young firebrand with sinewy arms from field labor, his skin marked by old welts, his spirit unquenched. He had Esther, a devout woman whose faith shone like a lantern in the night, and their infant son, Jacob, a bundle of innocence with tiny fists clutching at hope. The fear of separation drove Daniel mad, rumors of auctions whispered like demons. One starless night, under a moon veiled by clouds, Daniel, Caleb, a wiry youth with quick wit, and Samuel, broad and silent, haunted by losses, slipped away.
Their plan, crude, desperate: follow the North Star, evade patrols, seek the promised land of freedom. But fate, or divine intervention, intervened. Slave catchers, rough men on horseback, lanterns swinging like pendulums of doom, snared them before dawn, miles short of safety.
Bound and beaten, they were held at the neighboring Miller farm, a place of similar sorrow, its fields echoing with the same oppressed symphony. Word reached Riley like a thunderbolt. In the grand house, candles flickering. In silver holders, he raged, veins bulging, spittle flying.
Henson!
His bellow shook the walls.
Josiah entered, heart pounding, the polished floors creaking under his boots. Riley's eyes, bloodshot from drink, bored into him. Those bastards tried to run. Caught at Miller's. Fetch 'em back. And make 'em pay. Show every soul here what happens to traitors.
He thrust a new whip into Josiah's hands, braided leather, stiff and unforgiving, its handle worn smooth by prior sins. The weight settled like lead in Josiah's gut. He knew them: Daniel's defiant glare during assignments, challenging Josiah's compromises, Esther's quiet hymns sung while nursing Jacob, Caleb's jokes masking pain, Samuel's stoic endurance. Riding to Miller's, the horse's hooves thudded like accusations, the whip coiled on the saddle a serpent of temptation. Thoughts swirled, refuse, and Riley's fury would consume his family, Charlotte sold, children scattered.
Feign leniency, and exposure meant doom.
Obey, and stain his soul eternally. Biblical echoes tormented him: Cain's fratricide, Judas' kiss. Was he becoming the betrayer? Arriving at Miller's, the scene unfolded like a hellish tableau. The three men bound to posts, faces swollen, clothes torn, eyes a mix of fear and fire. Esther nearby, Jacob wailing in her arms, her tears silent rivers.
Onlookers, enslaved from both farms, gathered, breaths held, the air thick with dust and dread. Josiah met Daniel's gaze, accusation burned there, a silent cry: brother or beast? Josiah's hand trembled on the whip. He thought of his father's severed ear, Millie's sorrow, Charlotte's embrace, his children's futures. Divine retribution loomed. Would God forgive this? The first crack echoed like judgment. Josiah swung with precision, not fury, lashes that bit but didn't break, welts rising like red scripture on skin.
Daniel gasped, body arching, but held his scream, eyes locked on Josiah's. Each strike, a sin etched deeper. Esther's sobs mingled with Jacob's cries. A chorus of innocence lost. Caleb and Samuel followed, their flinches like echoes of Josiah's inner torment. The crowd flinched collectively, spirits crushed under the weight of spectacle. When done, Josiah staggered back, hands numb, whip bloodied, a symbol of his fall. He rode home in haze, the metallic scent of blood clinging, guilt a storm within. Necessary, he chanted, but doubt not. That night, in the cabin's gloom, Charlotte held him as he wept silently. Daniel's eyes haunted his dreams, a mirror to his fractured soul, a harbinger of divine reckoning yet to come. The wound festered. Days blurred into rituals of oversight, but nights brought phantoms: whips whistle, flesh's tear, accusing stares. Josiah sought solace in secret prayers, kneeling on dirt floors, whispering psalms of redemption. Forgive me, Lord, for I have become the rod of affliction. The plantation carried on, fields tilled, harvests gathered, but Josiah's spirit dimmed, a light flickering against encroaching shadow. He pondered legacy: would history remember him as hero or hypocrite?
The betrayal's echo rippled, seeding doubts among the enslaved, straining fragile trusts. Yet in this darkness, seeds of resolve stirred. Whispers of freedom, biblical promises of exodus, began to take root. Josiah's torment became fuel, a spiritual forge reshaping him.
But for now, the shadow stretched long, a chilling testament to survival's cost, divine justice's delay, and the haunting burden of choices that scar eternally. The guilt coiled around Josiah's soul like thorns from the crown of Christ, piercing deeper with every breath, every glance from those he had once called brothers and sisters. In the aftermath of that bloodied day at the Miller farm, the plantation seemed to warp under the weight of unspoken sins. The fields, once alive with the rhythmic swing of hoes and the low hum of work songs, now felt haunted by echoes, phantom cracks of the whip that Josiah heard in the rustle of leaves, in the creak of barn doors at dusk. He moved through the days like a ghost, his broad frame casting long shadows across the tobacco rows, but inside, a storm raged, a biblical flood of remorse threatening to drown him.
Was this God's retribution? A taste of the fire that awaited betrayers, like Judas in the garden, silver clinking in his pocket as he kissed away his Savior? He tried to bury it, layering justifications like soil over a grave of necessity, survival, the greater good for his family. But guilt is a relentless resurrector, rising unbidden in the quiet hours. Nights in the cabin became vigils of torment, the rough-hewn walls, scarred by years of wind and rain, closed in like a confessional booth. Charlotte would stir beside him, her hand finding his in the dark, warm and steady against his clammy skin. "The Lord knows your heart, Josiah," she'd murmur, her voice a soft hymn against the cacophony in his mind. But did he? Josiah pondered the scriptures he'd pieced together in secret, verses of mercy clashing with those of justice, the rod and staff that comforted yet corrected. His dreams twisted into visions, Daniel's accusing eyes multiplying into a chorus of the damned, their backs striped with welts that formed words, traitor, kinslayer. He'd wake gasping, sweat soaking the straw mattress, the metallic tang of imagined blood on his tongue. The enslaved community shifted around him, a subtle tectonic movement that left fissures in once solid ground. Old Martha, with her gnarled hands and eyes like ancient wells, had been a maternal figure to all, dispensing herbal remedies from her satchel of dried roots and leaves, her voice a gravelly oracle of survival tales. Now, as Josiah approached her stooped form in the fields, where the sun baked the earth into cracked clay, she'd avert her gaze, busying herself with weeding, her silence a thunderous rebuke. It stung like salt in a wound, reminding him of Proverbs' warnings against the unjust. The younger men, fiery spirits like Elijah, with his quick laugh and quicker fists, eyed him with a brew of resentment and reluctant awe. They'd gather in the shadows of the curing barns, where the air hung heavy with the sweet, acrid scent of drying tobacco, whispering fragments that died on the wind as Josiah drew near, master's pet, whip his own for a crust of bread. These barbs, though never hurled directly, lodged in his chest, each one a nail in the cross he bore. Isolation descended like a fog rolling off the Potomac, thick and chilling, severing him from the communal fire that sustained the enslaved. He was neither fully master nor fully kin, and liminal figure, damned to wander the in-between. Yet, in this void, Riley's trust bloomed like a poisonous flower. The master, lounging on the veranda of his weathered manor house, its white paint peeling like shedding skin, would clap Josiah on the back with a meaty hand, his breath sour from corn liquor. "Henson, you're a rock in this shifting sand," he'd slur, eyes glinting with possessive pride. "You get it, the order of things. God's hierarchy, man over beast, white over, well, you know." This praise twisted the knife. It elevated Josiah's status, granting him oversight of crops where golden cornstalks swayed like sentinels, management of livestock in pens that reeked of hay and manure, even errands to the market where he'd handle coins that burned his palm like Judas silver. Indispensable, yes, but the cage gleamed brighter, its bars forged from dependency. Empowerment and entrapment danced a macabre waltz, each step tightening the noose around his spirit. In this spiritual wilderness, family became his manna, his ark against the deluge. Charlotte, with her lithe form and eyes that held the depth of still waters, was his anchor, her quiet strength a testament to Eve's resilience in the garden's fall. She'd tend their hearth, a small fire crackling in the stone pit, casting flickering shadows that danced like angels on the walls. Their children, Tom with his curious spark, Peter the dreamer, Isaac the sturdy one, Rebecca's gentle smile, Mary's infectious giggle, Sarah's wide-eyed wonder, filled the cabin with life. Josiah would watch them at play in the yard, or wildflowers pushed defiantly through the dirt,
their laughter a pure melody cutting through the plantation's dirge. In those moments, a fierce, protective love surged, eclipsing the guilt like the sun banishing night. He'd scoop Sarah into his arms, her tiny hands sticky from pilfered berries, and vow silently, "I'd storm the gates of hell for you." This love was his justification, his shield against the accusing whispers, but also his Achilles' heel, the vulnerability Riley exploited without knowing. The economics of Maryland slavery loomed like the shadow of Pharaoh's empire, a system where human souls were ledger entries, profits reaped from flesh and blood. Tobacco had reigned supreme, its broad leaves carpeting the fields in emerald waves, but years of monoculture had leached the soil, turning fertile earth to weary dust. Prices swung like a pendulum, high one season, crashing the next, leaving planters like Riley teetering on ruin's edge. His manor, once grand with polished oak furniture and imported linens, now showed cracks, faded curtains, empty larders, creditors' letters piling like autumn leaves. For the enslaved, this volatility spelled doom. They were the liquid assets, chattel to be liquidated. Auctions haunted dreams, families splintered on the block, mothers' wails echoing as children were dragged away, bodies inspected like livestock under the auctioneer's gavel. The Deep South beckoned as a specter, cotton fields in Alabama's blistering heat, sugarcane in Louisiana's swamps, where whips sang constantly and death came swiftly. Josiah, privy to Riley's books, columns of red ink bleeding across pages, knew the precipice they balanced on. One failed crop, one bad bet, and the hammer fell. As 1825 dawned, the air shifted, not just the crisp bite of autumn leaves turning crimson, but a palpable tension, like the hush before a prophet's decree. Riley's woes amplified, lands barren, investments soured, vultures in frock coats circling with demands. Josiah, summoned to the study where candlelight flickered over cluttered desks, sensed the storm. Riley's face, drawn and sallow, forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Henson, old boy," he boomed, gesturing with a trembling hand, "Maryland's played out, soil's tired as an old mule. But Kentucky. Fertile valleys, black earth begging for seed. We'll start anew, lighter work, full bellies, families whole." He painted paradise, rolling hills under vast skies, communities thriving like the Israelites in Canaan. Josiah's heart plummeted, he'd heard such serpents tons before, promises slithering from master's lips. Then the decree, "You'll lead M. Henson, my trusted hand. Guide the caravaned men, women, kids, stock, to Daviess County. I'll follow once affairs are squared." Honor cloaked in horror, Josiah elevated to Moses, but leading not to freedom, but perhaps deeper bondage. That night, the cabin's darkness pressed like a tomb. Charlotte's optimism flickered, maybe the Lord's opening a door, but Josiah paced, floorboards groaning under his weight. Faces haunted him, the community's fragile hope, eyes alight with Riley's lies. He needed truth. Opportunity struck in twilight's veil. Riley's desk lay unguarded, papers strewn like fallen leaves. Josiah slipped in. Heart thundering like Sinai's quake, his literacy a forbidden fruit guiding his eyes. Bills, notes, then the damning letter to a Mr. Marks, words that seared like brimstone. Kentucky? A ruse. A staging ground to auction the lot in southern markets, liquidating souls to erase debts. Families shattered, promises dust. Josiah's hands shook, vision blurring, he was the unwitting Judas, delivering his people to crucifixion. The torment was apocalyptic, a soul rent asunder. Maintain the facade, smile, encourage, lead with hope's mask, while knowledge burned like hellfire. Expose Riley? Wrath would consume his family first, Charlotte sold to brothels, children to fields. Flee alone? Temptation whispered, but abandonment was Cain's mark. No, redemption demanded more, a grand escape, salvation for all, scripted in secrecy amid deception's play. Preparations unfolded like a ritual sacrifice, wagons loaded with scant belongings, worn quilts, iron pots, Bibles tucked away, under skies heavy with omen. The enslaved buzzed with optimism, faces glowing in firelight, unaware of the altar ahead. Josiah, the high priest of this charade, felt the shroud tighten, his conscience a screaming void. The journey commenced in late autumn's chill, a procession snaking westward, wagons creaking over rutted paths, feet shuffling in dust, air scented with wood smoke and frost-kissed earth. Josiah rode ahead on a sturdy bay horse, its hooves thudding like heartbeats, leading the line, men with bowed heads, women clutching babes, children skipping innocently. Optimism fragile as frost clung to them, but Josiah bore the secret's weight, each mile a step toward precipice or providence.
Divine justice loomed. Would God part these waters, or let them drown in sin's flood?
As forests thickened, leaves carpeting the ground in gold and red like shed blood, Josiah plotted in whispers. Night camps around crackling fires, stories shared under starlit canopies, tales of exodus, spirituals rising like prayers. He scanned horizons for patrols, dogs bayed distant threats. Guilt and resolve forged him anew, a vessel for redemption's fire.
Yet doubt not, was he savior or sinner?
The road stretched, fraught with peril, each dawn a test of faith. The path westward unfurled like a serpent's spine, twisting through the untamed wilds of western Maryland, where ancient forests whispered secrets of freedom long denied. Towering oaks and maples, their leaves ablaze in autumn's fiery palette of crimson and gold, formed a canopy that filtered sunlight into dappled patterns on the rutted trail, as if the heavens themselves were casting judgment in fractured light. The Allegheny Mountains loomed ahead, jagged peaks clawing at the sky like the fingers of a vengeful god, their slopes cloaked in mist that clung like the ghosts of forgotten ancestors. This was no mere journey, it was an exodus fraught with peril, a biblical trial where every mile tested the soul's endurance against the flesh's frailty. Josiah Henson rode at the vanguard, his sturdy horse plodding steadily, its hooves sinking into the soft earth with rhythmic thuds that mirrored the pounding of his heart. He was the shepherd to this flock of the damned, tasked with maintaining order, pace, and the illusion of hope, all while the serpent of truth coiled tighter around his conscience. Each dawn broke with a chill that seeped into bones, the air crisp and laced with the scent of pine resin and damp soil, as fog rose from the valleys like steam from a cauldron of simmering sins. Josiah would rise before the others, his breath visible in the cold, kindling a fire whose flames danced erratically, casting elongated shadows that seemed to mock his inner turmoil. "Up now, kin," he'd call, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of urgency, echoing across the makeshift camp where bodies stirred under threadbare blankets. The wagons groaned to life, wooden axles creaking like the protests of weary spirits, laden with scant provisions, sacks of cornmeal dusted with weevils, slabs of salted pork that tasted of preservation's bitterness. Livestock lowed plaintively, herded by the stronger men, while women clutched children close, their eyes scanning the horizon for unseen threats. The procession moved forward, feet shuffling in the dust that billowed up in gritty clouds, coating skin and clothes in a fine, ashen film that symbolized their shared bondage. Meager meals sustained them, cornbread baked over open flames, the smoke stinging eyes and throats, mingling with the earthy aroma of wild herbs foraged along the way. Nights descended like a divine curtain, the vast starlit sky indifferent to their plight, a reminder of the psalmist's cry, "How long, O Lord?" Huddled in clusters for warmth, they shared stories around flickering campfires, flames crackling and popping like distant gunfire, the wood's resinous scent blending with the musk of unwashed bodies. The wilderness symphony unnerved, owls hooting like omens, wolves howling in the distance as echoes of primal hunger, leaves rustling with the unseen passage of creatures. Josiah lay awake, staring at the constellations, or I am the hunter, perhaps a sign of pursuit, his mind a whirlwind of desperation. He plodded in silence, weighing escape routes through the underbrush, but the weight of leadership anchored him. How could he flee when the eyes of the trusting bored into him like nails? Encounters punctuated the trek, each a razor-sharp test of Josiah's facade. White settlers passed on horseback, their wagons piled with worldly goods, faces etched with pioneer optimism that contrasted sharply with the enslaved's scarred stares. "Where you headed?" they'd inquire, eyes narrowing at the caravan. Josiah would produce forged papers, Riley's seal gleaming like a false prophet's mark, his voice calm, authoritative, to new lands in Kentucky, under Master Riley's orders. Inside, his pulse raced, sweat beating despite the chill, fearing a slip that could unravel everything. Slave catchers loomed worse, rough men with scarred faces and coiled whips, dogs snarling at their heels. The air thick with the stench of tobacco chew and malice. They'd scrutinize documents under lantern light, their predatory gazes lingering on the women and children, appraising value like merchants at market. One such band halted them at a river crossing, water rushing over stones like hurried prayers. "These your niggers?" the leader growled, breath foul. Josiah nodded, heart thundering, invoking Riley's name as shield. They passed, but the encounter left scars, whispers among the group of chains rattling in the night. A band of Native Americans appeared once, silent figures on the ridge, feathers fluttering in the wind, their presence a poignant echo of dispossession. Dark eyes watched without word, bows slung across backs, a stark reminder of land stolen, people scattered like seeds in the wind. Josiah felt a kinship in their gaze, another tribe bound by white man's greed, tension thick as the mountain air, but they vanished like spirits, leaving only footprints in the mud. One etched memory burned brightest, deep in the Alleghenies, where paths narrowed to treacherous ledges, cliffs dropping into abyssal voids misted in fog. Ruth, a young woman with hollowed cheeks from endless toil, collapsed mid-stride, her body crumpling like a felled sapling. Her infant wailed, a piercing cry that sliced the air, tiny fists flailing against the injustice of exhaustion. The caravan halted, murmurs rippling like waves, fear, compassion, urgency. Josiah dismounted, knees sinking into the leaf-strewn earth, his hands steadying her fevered brow. Delays were forbidden, Riley's edict rang in his mind, keep pace, or face my wrath. Yet abandonment was abomination, a sin against the Good Samaritan's parable. Eyes pleaded around him, Charlotte's from afar, mirroring his own dread, the men's, seeking guidance. Jacob, Daniel, fashion a litter, he commanded, voice firm yet frayed. Not the defiant Daniel of old, but kin in name, quiet and strong. Branches lashed with vines formed the cradle, Josiah bore one end himself, muscles straining under the weight, slowing the march. Rocks bit into boots, sweat soaked his shirt, but this act, a small rebellion, sparked gratitude's spark. Whispers shifted, he ain't all master's man. Yet it chipped at his soul, a reminder of the humanity he clung to amid deception's mire. The secret's torment never waned, a spiritual scourge flaying him inwardly. Children's laughter echoed in valleys, pure and untainted, twisting his gut like thorns. Adults dreamed aloud, a patch of garden in Kentucky, soil rich as Eden. Josiah forced smiles, words of encouragement tasting like gall, knowing the auction block awaited like Gehenna's fires. He felt spectral, a Judas among apostles, privy to betrayal's script. Campfire nights deepened the agony, flames hypnotizing, embers glowing like accusatory eyes, replaying Riley's letter, words seared into memory. Escape tempted, slip away with Charlotte and the children under moon's veil, skills honed in forests guiding them north. But faces held him, trusting, dependent, bound by his reluctant crown. Leadership's yoke, heavier than iron, chained him to this doomed pilgrimage. Each mile forged resolve in suffering's furnace, teaching lies art, conviction in voice, loyalty's mask, while plotting defiance in heart's shadows. Danger's signs, patrols' lanterns flickering like fallen stars, honed his vigilance, a survival psalm etched in vigilance. Arrival in Daviess County brought weary relief, the land unfolding in gentle hills under a vast Kentucky sky, blue as forgotten promises. The farm, modest fields of dark loam waiting for plow, scattered cabins of fresh-hewn logs smelling of pine, offered respite. Exhausted bodies toiled, clearing underbrush with axes ringing like bells, planting seeds in furrows that promised harvest. Hope flickered anew, spirits lifting like morning mist, buoyed by Riley's absent vows. But Josiah saw veils, fertile earth masking slaughter's stage. Mr. Finch, Riley's agent, arrived, a gaunt figure in starched collar, eyes cold as winter steel, voice clipped like ledger entries. He oversaw with grudging nod to Josiah's efficiency, but suspicion lurked, a serpent in the grass. Clues mounted like storm clouds, Finch's hushed talks with traders under porch lanterns, appraising gazes sweeping the workers like merchants at bazaar. Tools promised rusted or absent, rations dwindled from meager to starvation's edge, cornmeal thinned, meat scarce. Inspections chilled deepest, lined in yard under sun's glare, teeth bared, muscles flexed, health probe like cattle. Finch's pen scratched in leather ledger, ominous as judgment's scroll. Josiah watched, dread icing veins, knowing the signs, preludes to sale. Feigning illness one twilight, Josiah infiltrated Finch's office, heart slamming like a blacksmith's hammer. Papers scattered on oaken desk, candle flickering shadows that danced like demons. Correspondence unveiled, Riley scrawled detailing sales to New Orleans marts, Natchez blocks excess stock a euphemism for souls. Names leaped, families he'd guided, trusting eyes now damned. His own absent, for now a mercy twisted like thorns. Debts deeper than oceans, all would follow. Tension thickened, air heavy with unspoken fears. Whispers in cabins, market comin'. South's hell. Eyes questioned Josiah, he smiled ash-tasting lies. Traders arrived, hard men in dusters, eyes calculating as abacuses, pouring ledgers with Finch, pointing fieldsward. Abigail, hopeful mother, singled children clutching skirts.
Protective fury surged in Josiah, but intervention meant doom. Riley's return, haggard, cheer vanished, grim as reaper.
Closed doors hid conspiracies. Josiah, fetching papers, caught fragments, prices, dates, destinations.
Sale imminent. Crystallization struck, traitors eyeing his children, measuring innocence.
Charlotte's terror mirrored his. He couldn't save all, systems Goliath too vast.
Prioritize family, escapes arc amid flood. Moral avalanche crushed abandonment's sin, like Peter's denial, but survival's imperative. Burden eternal, a cross borne in silence. Breaking point, cold dawn, gray skies promising winter's bite.
Riley gathered them, voice flat, difficult decisions, new opportunities.
Euphemisms mocked.
Traitors advanced, names called. Abigail torn from children, screams primal, rending air like temple veil.
Jacob from Esther, collapse echoing biblical lament. Families shattered, pleas futile, indifference cold. Josiah stood rigid, mask intact, storm within.
Eyes accused, Charlotte clutched young.
His family next, certainty chilled to marrow. Divine dilemma peaked, betray many, save few? Soul's scream echoed eternally.
The yard stood silent under a leaden sky, the air thick with the metallic scent of impending rain, as if the heavens themselves wept for the fractured souls below. Riley's voice cut through the chill like a dull blade, his words euphemisms for doom hanging in the mist like shrouds. New opportunities, he muttered, eyes averted from the huddled mass of enslaved, their faces etched with dawning horror.
But Josiah saw the truth unveiled, traitors advancing like reapers in the field, their boots crunching gravel with finality.
Abigail's name rang out first, a young mother whose gentle spirit had sustained many on the trek from Maryland. Her children, tiny figures with dirt-streaked cheeks and eyes wide as saucers, clung to her skirts, small hands grasping fabric as if it were life's tether. The traitor's rough grip tore her away, her screams a primal wail that pierced the morning, echoing off the distant hills like a biblical lamentation. The children's cries followed, raw and unending, arms outstretched in futile plea, a scene straight from the Pharaoh's plagues, where innocence was sacrificed on altars of greed. Josiah's heart fractured in that moment, a mirror shattering to reflect his deepest abyss. Riley's debts loomed like the shadow of Babel's tower, vast, insatiable, built on the bones of the oppressed. Desperation had stripped the master of pretense, his haggard face, lined with the furrows of failed gambles, betrayed a soul sold to mammon. Josiah glimpsed his own family's fate in Abigail's ruin, Charlotte's warm embrace severed, his children's laughter silenced forever.
No more rationalizations, no more delays.
The catalyst ignited a divine spark or demonic whisper, compelling action.
He would not let his kin become offerings to this idol of commerce. Escape beckoned, not as triumph, but as survival's grim sacrament, a flight from one hell into another's uncertain maw. Clarity descended like manna in the wilderness, cold and sustaining.
Josiah moved through the day with mechanical precision, his broad frame casting elongated shadows across the fields where tobacco seedlings pushed defiantly through soil still scarred by plow. He mapped the farm in his mind, the overseer's cabin, its lantern glow flickering like a false beacon, the winding paths through thickets of oak and hickory, branches clawing like accusing fingers, the river's murmur beyond, a natural barrier where salvation's vain. The North Star, Polaris, the heavenly guidepost, would be his compass, a celestial promise echoing the Magi's journey, but toward freedom's fragile light rather than a king's cradle. He sought Charlotte in the dim confines of their cabin, walls of rough logs exuding the faint aroma of earth and smoke from the hearth. Her eyes met his, dark pools reflecting shared burdens, no words needed at first, just the press of hands, calloused from labor yet tender in union. Tonight, he whispered, voice a low rumble masking the quake within. We take the children. Leave all else. Charlotte's face paled, but resolve hardened her features like clay fired in kiln's heat. She nodded, a silent vow echoing Ruth's fidelity in scripture, whither thou goest, I will go. Their 6 children, Tom, Peter, Isaac, Rebecca, Mary, Sarah, sensed the gravity, their usual chatter subdued to whispers. Josiah gathered provisions stealthily, a burlap sack slung over shoulder, filled with cornmeal ground coarse as regret, strips of dried venison tasting of salt and survival, biscuits hard as stone but life-sustaining. Charlotte sewed pouches from scraps of cloth, faded and threadbare, stuffing them with trinkets, a carved wooden cross for faith's anchor, a frayed blanket woven with memories of warmer nights. They spoke in hushed tones, instructions veiled as bedtime tales, quiet as mice, little ones. The Lord watches over us, like Daniel in the lion's den. The children's eyes widened. Mixtures of fear and trust, tiny hands clutching parents as if to ward off the encroaching dark. Dusk fell like a curtain of judgment, painting the sky in bruised purples and indigos, long shadows stretching across the yard where echoes of weeping lingered, faint sobs from shattered families, a haunting dirge that clawed at Josiah's conscience. The overseer's fire died to embers, glowing red like the eyes of demons in retreat, the farm settling into night's symphony, crickets chirping in rhythmic mockery, and owls hoot piercing like a prophet's warning. Moonless blackness enveloped all, a void both ally and adversary, hiding their flight yet amplifying every sound. Josiah led them out, each step deliberate, bare feet padding on dew-slick grass that whispered betrayals. Sarah, the youngest, nestled in his arms, her warmth a fragile flame against his chest, her soft breaths a reminder of innocence at stake. Charlotte guided the others, a chain of small shadows linked by hands, their forms ghostly in the gloom. They skirted fields where cornstalks rustled like sentinels, the air heavy with the loamy scent of turned earth and faint tobacco residue. Peril lurked in every shadow, a branch snapping underfoot like thunder in silence, freezing them mid-stride. Josiah whirled, hand to the crude knife at his belt, forged in secret, its blade dull but desperate, eyes piercing the dark for pursuers. Nothing, just wind's deceit, but it etched deeper the terror of recapture. Stories haunted him, slave catchers with bloodhounds baying like hell's chorus, whips cracking anew, punishments biblical in cruelty, limbs severed, spirits broken. They plunged into the woods, trees embracing like a thorny crown, branches snagging clothes and skin, drawing beads of blood as penance. Darkness absolute, starlight filtering through leaves like divine pinpricks, guiding by feel, the moss on north-facing trunks, wind's subtle shift carrying pine's sharp tang. The children's endurance astonished, weary. Legs trudging, whimpers stifled by trust's gag. Charlotte's presence bolstered, her determination a spiritual armor, eyes fixed on Josiah as Eve to Adam in exile. Distance grew, human cries fading to nature's hum, frogs croaking in wetlands, leaves sighing, but peace eluded. Silence brimmed with unspoken sins, abandonment's weight, the moral wreckage left in Kentucky's dust. Josiah fled not just chains, but the wreckage of his soul, whip-wielder, secret keeper, betrayer in survival's name. Guilt twisted like roots in his gut, a serpent's coil reminding of Eden's fall. Had he eaten the fruit of self-preservation at others' expense? Weeks blurred into a harrowing odyssey, nights of flight under Polaris's gaze, days hidden in thickets where sunlight dappled like fleeting grace. They traversed forests dense as doubts, forded icy rivers where currents tugged like temptations to surrender, scaled mountains jagged as shattered commandments. Bodies ached, blisters blooming on feet, hunger gnawing like locusts in famine, sustained by foraged berries tart as remorse, water from streams clear as unattainable purity. The Underground Railroad's whispers guided, safe houses materializing like manna barns with false floors, Quakers' attics scented with hay and benevolence, hands extending bread in maps in shadowed exchanges. Each rustle invoked terror, dogs' distant bays echoing pursuit, moonlight casting shadows that morphed into patrols. Josiah bore the young one, legs faltered, his frame a bulwark, mind a vigil of prayer. Lord, hide us as thou didst Moses in the cleft. Charlotte remained steadfast, her faith an unquenchable lamp, urging children with tales of Canaan. Yet Josiah's torment deepened, visions of Kentucky's forsaken, Abigail's orphans scattered like chaff, Esther's despair swallowing her whole, Daniel's eyes accusing from dreams. Hero or coward, the question gnawed, a spiritual worm burrowing deep. Salvation for kin, damnation for kin left behind, scales unbalanced. Like Peter's denial thrice before dawn. Canada's border crossed in exhausted hush, not jubilation's fanfare but relief's sigh, air lighter, untainted by slavery's smog. Snow-dusted fields stretched under vast skies, a promised land cold yet free. They built anew, Josiah's hands clearing land, axes ringing like redemption's bells, cabin rising from logs hewn with purpose. Dawn's settlement bloomed in Dresden, Ontario, a haven for fugitives, schools echoing with alphabet's liberation, fields yielding crops as symbols of self-sufficiency. He led on the railroad, guiding scores through perils, his courage legendary, voice thundering in abolitionist halls from North America to England's fog-shrouded shores. Yet ghosts persisted. Years later, Caleb, a fugitive Hollowite from chains, recognized Josiah in the settlement's bustle.
Tension crackled, Caleb's tale confirmed nightmares, Riley's fury post-escape unleashing sails to Deep South's infernos. Abigail's children parted, Esther lost to grief's abyss. Guilt crashed anew, a tidal wave drowning peace. Moral amplification, freedom's gift tainted by others' chains.
In 1849, autobiography dictated The Life of Josiah Henson, a testament etched in ink, but sanitized like whitewashed tombs. Overseer rolled lost, whip sting omitted, Kentucky's secret buried deep. Narrative heroic, inspiring abolition, shielding from guilt's glare. This reached Harriet Beecher Stowe, birthing Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852, Josiah transmuted to Tommy Pious, enduring, martyred. Irony profound, complex survivor simplified to submissive icon, resonating yet erasing torment's depths. Later years brought accolades, but shadows clung. In cabin solitude, hearth flickering like conscience's flame, Josiah pondered, more paths untaken? Legacy not Tom's gentleness, but moral courage's chill, survivor bearing secret guilt's cross eternally.